Hello everybody, you're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. Call me biased if you like, but reggae is by far the most influential genre of modern music. Born in the ghettos of Kingston, Jamaica in the late 1960s as direct descendant of ska and rocksteady, it evolved into the slower, throbbing skank rhythm which took over the world by the 1970s. It was from that foundation that offshoots like dub, dancehall and lovers rock would develop. In places outside Jamaica, the local musicians adapted it to spawn their own unique subgenres like two-tone in Britain and the subject of today's video in Reggaeton that emerged 3 decades ago in Latin America. This sound is essentially the grandchild of reggae in that it's an offshoot of dancehall and has since become a juggernaut that is the most successful cultural export from that part of the world. Reggaeton superstars like Daddy Yankee, Bad Bunny and J Balvin have collectively generated billions of dollars worth in streams, concert ticket sales, downloads and much more, with absolutely no signs of slowing down anytime soon. I dare say that as far as the 21st century is concerned, it's the most successful offshoot of reggae, eclipsing dancehall by far, and that is saying a whole lot. But for all its massive success, it's not been without controversy, as that music was banned in Puerto Rico in the 1990s by the authorities, who clamped down on concerts, stopped its airplay on the radio, and seized cassette recordings from record stores. Not to mention reggae icons who have criticized reggaeton's biggest stars for not giving credit to Jamaican artists for the origins of that sound, including Buju Banton, who had this to say on a podcast not too long ago.
A lot of culture vultures out there. We have sat and we have watched reggaeton, taken reggae music.
I was going there. I was going there. Let's finish with Afro beats and then let's
go. Our music so hard and stolen our culture. I'm not knocking nobody, but you don't give us no respect, motherfucker.
Right.
And you still expect us to kowtow and act like we take something from you?
But a few years ago, what was just a wave of internet banter escalated into a huge lawsuit by two very iconic Jamaican producers who are battling for the very right to claim the sound of reggaeton as their own unique creation and intellectual property. This case is, in my opinion, the most pivotal in modern music history, with the potential to shake the music industry as we know it to its very core. Let's take a look at the astonishing story of reggaeton and the current war that is raging for its soul. Now, though this sound's current ground zero is in Puerto Rico, its earliest origins came from Panama's Afro-Caribbean population in the 1970s. That section of Panamanian society had moved there from places like Jamaica and Barbados to work as the migrant laborers that built the Panama Canal at the beginning of the 20th century. 6 decades later, the descendants of these immigrant workers began to experience marginalization and took to reggae and its revolutionary conscious themes as an outlet for their deep frustrations. It wasn't long before some local artists among them began to release reggae tunes in Spanish, and that sound became known as Reggae en Español. It would grow rapidly over time, but it was in 1985 that the sound we now know as reggaeton was first performed on a record. In what was the dawn of dancehall's digital age, an artist named Renato released a song called El Neni that was a withering criticism of police brutality in Panama at the time. This song became a hit and opened the floodgates for a slew of Panamanian artists to do their own thing over similar rhythms, and cemented reggaeton as a new distinct sound. And one of those was a singer and producer called El General, who by the beginning of 1990s got the brainwave to combine that sound with the hip-hop and dancehall fusion that was growing fast over in New York, with the likes of Supercats at the very tip of that spear.
The rhythm track, part of it is coming from Jamaica, but what they try to do, they try to cross over with the beat, the hip-hop beat. It's like a mixed emotion. You get to listen. One side is like over here and the next side is over here, but everything is mixed in.
This sound caught on like wildfire across Latin America, with artists from places like Honduras and Guatemala doing their thing. And even though it was big in all these countries, it was very tame compared to the cultural revolution that reggaeton sparked in Puerto Rico around that time, as that sound was adopted as the soundtrack for the Boricua underground hip-hop scene. It was indeed in Puerto Rico that the standard or foundation rhythm for reggaeton became official, and the instrumental in question was from Shabarank's mighty hit from 1990 called Dembao, off his album Just Reality, that was produced by the great Bobby Digital. This sound was heavily adopted by poor Puerto Rican youth on the fringes of society, who merged it with rap and mostly had lyrics about street life, violence, poverty, and the usual problems in the ghetto. In simple terms, the Puerto Rican equivalent of dancehall. The government wasn't smiling and cracked down heavily on this underground sound, seizing tapes, banning the sale of that music in record stores, and launching media campaigns against the artists themselves. But as is always the case, it just drove that music deeper underground and made it more intriguing to young people. But in 1995, an artist named DJ Negro decided to break from the norm when he released an album called The Noise 3 that was totally clean without any curse words. And this record was allowed to thrive by the authorities and marked the beginning of that genre's acceptance into the mainstream for the first time, as middle-class kids began to accept it. Up until then, the music didn't even have a name, as everyone simply called it Dembao. But from then on, it became known as Reggaeton. The Spanish suffix of ton added to reggae implies something more intense and heavier than usual. It's widely believed that El General was the originator of that term, though it's still disputed that other reggaeton icons like Daddy Yankee and DJ Nelson lay claim to the credits. The sound slowly gained traction and massive acceptance in that country in the new millennium, with even politicians who were formerly against it began to use it for campaign jingles. And the likes of superstars Daddy Yankee and Queen Ivy became brand ambassadors for huge companies like Pepsi and Mountain Dew. And it was indeed in the 2000s that it became a global sound, exemplified by Daddy Yankee's 2004 hit Gasolina, the first reggaeton track to get a nomination for Latin Grammy Record of the Year. Even US rapper Noriega would get in on the action with his huge reggaeton hit Oye Mi Canto in the same year. Needless to say, it became huge on the international scene with the passage of time, with the likes of Bad Bunny, J Balvin, and Nicky Jam making it a billion-dollar industry. But for all its international appeal, it's drawn plenty of scorn from reggae artists and commentators who believe reggaeton icons have failed to give credit to where the credit is really due, namely Jamaica and reggae. But in 2019, what had been mere internet banter and cultural commentary would escalate big time when the estate of the late Wycliffe Tilly Johnson and his partner Cleveland Clevie Brown filed a humongous lawsuit in a US district court against the Universal Music Group and Warner Music in 2019, claiming that more than 2,000 songs released by those labels, which were all based on the Dembao rhythm, had infringed on their copyrights. Though Dembao was produced by Bobby Digital, it's based totally on an instrumental called the Fish Market Rhythm that Tilly and Clevie put together in 1989. This lawsuit targets over 160 artists, including Justin Bieber and all the biggest reggaeton icons' multi-platinum records over the past 3 decades. The other side, of course, have pushed back through their lawyers, saying that the drum pattern, which is the very crux of the matter, had existed for centuries in the form of the habanera rhythm, an Afro-Cuban drum pattern that was adopted by Jamaican churches as far back as the 19th century. And when you listen to them, they do sound a bit similar. And reggaeton lawyers also pointed to an interview by Tilly and Clevie themselves in 2005, in which they admitted that they drew inspiration from the Poco beat of Jamaican Pentecostal churches for the Fish Market rhythm in the first place. Tilly and Clevie's lawyers would fire back, saying that the Fish Market rhythm is fundamentally different from habanera, and the back and forth has continued to fly as both sides battle and wait for the court to give its own verdict. At this point, it's left for the judge to decide, and no one can guess where it's going. But we are sure of one thing: it's going to be a watershed moment for not only reggae and reggaeton, but for the entire music industry itself. There are schools of thought that say that with reggaeton now a cultural phenomenon and industry of its own, it's become too big for one person to claim, while others say Tilly and Clevie deserve heavy compensation for that genius rhythm which has spawned an entire subgenre of reggae. Personally, I believe this matter is going to be settled out of court with a huge payout, but that's just my opinion. For now, all we can do is speculate and wait for the courts to decide. But anyway, it turns out reggaeton is here to stay. So there you have it. Thank you for watching this video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, Jah bless.